magnificent people. And Professor Emily Reynolds, thank you for taking great care of me. And also Professor Richard Williams, thank you. Yes. Let me begin with a prayer. Turning the tide from violence to peace begins with prayer. In prayer, we can nurture our light in the spirit of strength and compassion, with the hope that it will illuminate the consciousness of darkened souls whose suffering has made a home to terror. We pray that our light be used to warm and give comfort to those places in the heart that have surrendered to hatred and despair, and bring clarity and peace to their hearts. We pray for human dignity to rise from the spirit by remembering all of the men, women, and children who have lived and continue to live with fear and horror as present and constant companions. We pray for the military and civilian men, women, and children who themselves are struggling with the fear and ugliness of man's inhumanity to man. Let us connect our hearts and energies with the world and its being, so that those poor souls who are caught up in the storm of violence may know peace. Those who would be interested in my remarks, I will try to be as brief as possible tonight, but those who are interested can contact my office and we'll be happy to send them to you. My email address is asaid@american.edu, asaid@american.edu. Let me begin with few small remarks and begin with the question, where are we now in the relationship between the West and Muslims, between the West and Islam? Yeah. Where are we now? We are aware that we are at a crisis point. And as we all are aware of, crisis brings opportunity. Where we are now, in terms of our relationship, I refer to three stories. Story number one is a story of confrontation, that the West and Islam are in confrontation, clash of civilization. That Muslims and Islam cannot reconcile with democracy, modernization, or development. That's a dominant story. Dominant not only on a public level, but also a story that has currency among scholars. When you look at publications on Islam and Muslims. So we have, that's one story. Then we have a second story, that Islam and the West are compatible. That's the second C. First is confrontation. Second, they are compatible. After all, we are reminded that Islam is an extension of the biblicist tradition. It's part of the Abrahamic tradition. That story is beginning to gain some currency. And, yeah. But there is a third story that I like to tell. I'm not alone in that story. Many others with whom I work. I call it the other C, story of complementarity. That Islam and the West complement one another. My perspective is that throughout much of history, nations have met as rivals in a process of exploitation. And my first story calls for a different meeting, a meeting of people not as rivals in a process of exploitation, but a meeting where America enters into an exchange by giving its best to Egypt and Egypt giving its best to America. A story of exchanging the best for the best. Yeah. That's the story of complementarity. Yeah. So my next question becomes, how do we prepare for peace? Yeah. Yeah. Let me share with you some comments. To re-engage in ways that make partnership for a better world possible, Westerners and Muslims must first ask themselves if they are willing to make new choices. That's when we ask the question, are we willing to make new choices? Yeah. The United States has the power at this time to select between two paths, two different approaches, two different paths, P-A-T-H-S. America selecting the path of the brave, or America selecting the path of the strong. Yeah. When I speak of choices, these are choices that we have to make. When I speak about the path of the strong, America the strong, this is a familiar one because its actions are motivated by fear. America the strong will continue to pursue a hegemonic foreign policy strategy predicated on ensuring its own security in ways that other nations regard as threatening and contrary to their interest. That's America the strong. Yeah. That's a path that has been pursued by all great nations, primary nations, superpowers. In my office, I have a map that was made by Idrisi in the 12th century for King Roger II of Sicily. It's the first map of planet Earth. And when guests look at the map, they keep looking at it. South is north and north is south. Idrisi wanted to put Mecca in the center of the universe. So nations do that historically, to put themselves at the center of the universe. On the other hand, the path of America the brave relies on the courage to make short-term concessions as well as bilateral and multilateral compromises. This path is one of leadership instead of control, leadership instead of control. In choosing this path, the U.S. response to mounting disorder will be a concomitant advancing of more humane and global community. I mention this because I firmly believe that what is good for the world is good for America. I believe that. I'm trying to paraphrase, what's good for General Motors is good for America. But what is good for the world is good for America, because we are the biggest shareholder. Yeah. Yeah. U.S. policy in the Middle East is a significant source of Islamic-Western acrimony. When I travel around Middle East, Islamic countries, during my presentations, students will argue with me about American imperialism, colonialism, etc. At the end of the evening, when we get together, they say, tell us. And they are fascinated by our values, our culture, our civilization. What I have learned in my travels, what inspires the world about us is not what we have done internationally or what we are doing internationally. It's what we have done domestically. Yeah, that's what inspires them about us. That's the beauty of this nation. Supporting change in the Muslim Middle East requires appreciating the positive potential of religious activism. Yes, yes. Yeah. Acknowledging positive roles for religion does not mean turning a blind eye to the fact that religions have also been used to justify slavery, imperialism, and opposition to workers' rights and women's suffrage. What is necessary, however, is a balanced view that does not regard progress as the child of secularity alone, and that acknowledges that the role of new religious thinking in participatory governance, public accountability, human rights, and justice. Yeah. We have to acknowledge the role that religion plays. I know my distinguished colleague Douglas has been working on that, and that's part of his mission. Like Americans, Muslims have choices to make too. They have the opportunity to choose between defensive, collectivistic outlook that underscores alienation between Muslims and members of other cultural and religious communities, and a more broadly inclusive framework that seeks to make traditional Islamic prescriptions for social justice, human dignity, and cultural pluralism more broadly relevant to the contemporary world. Much of the political behavior of Muslims at this time is deeply rooted in a deep sense of disempowerment, in a deep sense of powerlessness. When Muslims were powerful, as they were in Andalusia and other pieces of their history, they were open. So much of their behavior is deeply rooted in a sense of powerlessness. My next question is, what could be some of the building blocks toward or an agenda of Muslim-Western cooperation? I'll mention 9 of them. 1, strategizing for conflict transformation. Yeah. Generally speaking, current US and Western policies manifest an overriding concern to control the direction of events, whereas Muslims hope for change and cultural determination. Neither side is sufficiently vigorous in seeking points of leverage for nonviolent, constructive responses in social and political ills. Rather than conflict management or conflict escalation, we need cooperative strategies for conflict transformation. Conflict transformation, beyond conflict resolution, how to transform the conflict. Proposals to revive or recalibrate the Cold War containment framework is not going to work. it's not going to work. Yeah. We need to be, when we look at Tunis, I mean Tunisia and Egypt right now, yeah. What do we do? One of the questions asked of me many times now, how about the Muslim Brotherhood? Yeah. Yes, what do we do with that? How do we deal with a Muslim Brotherhood? How can we deal with that? I will be talking more about that. So my second is to strengthen diplomatic preparedness. That's second block. Block number one I mentioned is to strategize for conflict transformation. Block number two, to strengthen diplomatic preparedness. Diplomatic discourse intended to win trust rather than cause offense should give increased weight to multilateralism. Yeah. More multilateralism. That's how we strengthen diplomatic preparedness. Number three, very important for those of us working with peace. Number three, insist on negotiated solutions. Negotiated solutions, as we are trying to do now in Egypt. Insist on negotiated solutions. Though governments may not wish to trumpet a willingness to engage with non-state groups, we have to deal with them. We have to deal with them. Yeah. We have to engage with Islamic movements and give enhanced credibility to Western demonstration of respect for Islamic symbolism. We have to do that. Mm-hmm. Western policy toward the Middle East should not target Islamic revivalism, rather than seek to manipulate intra-religious rivalries between the Persians and Arabs, Shia Islam and Sunni Islam. We have to work collaboratively with both sides. And I would love to answer questions about that. In addition to creative Western policies that engage multiple stakeholders in the Middle East and South Asia, there is always much room for new Islamic initiatives. Muslims have to take initiatives, for sure. Yeah. Number four, foster greater inclusion of Muslims in North American life, official life governance. That's beginning to happen. President Obama has done and is doing a good deal in moving in that direction. So that's happening. What is compromising that is what we see, the movement against building mosques in the United States and other places. So we have to. 5, support change from within in the Islamic world. Yeah. Support change from within. We are trying to deal with that now in Egypt by contributing to the radicalization of young Muslim men. The war on terror has done more to destabilize Muslim countries than to cultivate a basis for sustainable peace. Despite this trend, fostering incremental change from within in Muslim lands is among the most vital tasks for Western Islamic partnership. Yeah. That's doable. That's doable. That's very doable. And the United States and other Western countries can best support positive internal development by promoting political participation within structures, i.e., I'm asked about the Muslim Brotherhood. Yes, let them participate. Yes, the Islamicists in Tunisia, let them participate. And Islamists in other countries, Muslim countries, let them participate. 6, use public diplomacy to listen as well as to speak. Yeah. I have had that experience. After 9/11, a group of us was invited by the then Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. We attended the meeting. A number of Muslim, Arab, and Pakistani, Iranian, predominantly scholars. Yeah. We attended the meeting. what we discovered at that meeting, and we were asked to also participate in a video under the direction of State Department, public diplomacy. We went to the video to participate, and 90%, 95% of what we were saying was magnificent, very well received. It was being taped. Last 5% critical. We started to talk about what Muslims, Arabs, and Persians are encountering in the United States. Everything was canceled. Everything was canceled. So what public diplomats are doing, co-opting Muslims, Arabs, and Persians who agree with the administration. So when I say we have to listen as well as the other. Foster, number 7, advance intercultural and interreligious dialogue. That is very important. Yeah. It's happening. It's happening, but what we need to do more with interreligious dialogue, interfaith dialogue, we need to focus on issues, meaning Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others getting together, talking about what does my faith bring to the table to deal with the issue of poverty? What does my faith bring to the table to deal with the issue of the environment? What does my faith bring to the table to deal with the issue of violence? And learn from one another. That's very important to happen. Number 8, support religious peacemaking. Even when many of the motivations behind religious conflict are not particularly spiritual in nature, religiously based peacemaking activity can help counteract misdirected forms. And number 9, to establish religious endowments for peace. And what I want to propose here, we have a United States Institute of Peace that was established by the Congress of the United States. It's in Washington, D.C., very successful structure. They have a new building that they are moving to this week. The United States Institute of Peace promotes, and it was the alternative. Initially, as many of you know, there was a movement to establish well, we have Department of State, Department of Defense. The notion was to establish a Department of Peace, but the compromise ended by establishing a United States Institute of Peace. It does great work. What I am promoting to establish an interfaith Institute of Peace. And for that interfaith Institute of Peace to multiply, to have interfaith institutes of peace. This would be non-governmental. And it could be different institutes could be located in different places. Some of them, one could be in the United States or two. To begin with, one maybe in South America, one in Europe, one in the Middle East, one in Asia, one in Africa. These would be interfaith institutes of peace to advance and promote what we can learn from one another, what are best practices in different religions when it comes to peace. Now, in my conclusion, I ask a question: why should we give life to the new story? Meaning, why should we give life to the story of complementarity? Yeah. My dearly beloved friends, Islam and the West, we are truly between stories. Yeah. 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 To work with the new story, we have to work together. We are stuck together. Yeah. We are here to live together. Yeah. And I will conclude with Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, a 12th, 13th century Muslim mystic, scholar, philosopher. In the 12th century, he said to us, "My heart has become capable of every form. It is a pasture for gazelles. It is a convent for Christian monks. It's a temple for idols and the pilgrim of the table of the Quran. My heart," he said, "is capable of many forms. Love is my faith and religion." Yeah, that's Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. Echoed by another Muslim, Rumi, when Rumi reminds us, "I am neither from the east nor the west. No boundary exists in my breast. I am free." Thank you for your invitation, and I stand prepared to respond to your questions. The message I'm sharing with you when it comes to interfaith dialogue, there's fear of dialogue. Oftentimes we are afraid to enter into dialogue. What I have experienced with dialogue is through dialogue, we develop new knowledge. There's no fear that the Muslim will become less Muslim, or the Christian less Christian, or the Jew less of a Jew, or Hindu less. In fact, the opposite. He or she becomes a better Christian, a better Muslim, a better Jew. So when it comes to dialogue, that has been my experience. And talking about part of what I'm sharing with you, story about a person who was desperately looking for the keys he had lost. He had lost his keys and was desperately looking for them. A friend of his was passing by and inquired, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm looking for my keys." And he came to help him to look for the keys together. Time passed, they couldn't find the keys. So the friend asked his friend, said, "Where did you exactly lose your keys?" Oh, he said, "I lost them in a dark alley behind, but there are no lights over there. I'm looking for them under the daylight, under the lights." We have to look for them every place. We have to look for them, yes, through inclusion with those with whom we disagree. So it is looking for them. It is, we are stuck together. Yes. One of the reasons that peace is more difficult than violence. Violence is reactive. Peace is proactive. Peace is proactive. It's not reactive. And that's, and working with peace with Muslims, Christians, and others, we cannot continue to look for peace or reconciliation through retrospective. We have to look for it also through prospective. Not only retrospective, but it has to be prospective. I'd be happy to respond to your questions.
Hello, my name is Mina, and I'm studying human development here. I believe that's normally the way we go about introducing ourselves at these. And I wanted to inquire, my understanding is, based on your name, that you are both Muslim and a descendant of Muhammad. And I wanted to ask if you felt that that was part of your motivation for your studies and your mission that you've accepted in your life.
Part of my motivation for the work I'm involved in, around age 6 or 7, the town, the village where I was raised in Syria was caught in battle against the French. men were shooting at one another, and women, my mother included, carried us. And we ended up in Aleppo, Syria. And my brother, Riyadh, was killed around age 3. Not deliberately, it was a military truck that ran him over. It was my task to carry him to my mother, and his blood went inside my mouth. And then my motivation continues. In Israel, participating in a conference, I asked the taxi driver to take me from West Jerusalem to East Jerusalem. He was reluctant. He said, they are killing people there. I don't want to take you there. But then finally he accepted, started driving, and looked back at me. He said, what are you doing? Where are you from? To shock him, I said, Syria, because Syria and Israel are at war. He was shocked. Then he asked me more, and I told him what I was doing. After about 10-15 minutes, he goes on his radio in Hebrew. Then he finished, he said, Mr. Said, he said, I went on radio with our people to go on radio with the Palestinian taxis to meet you because we don't want to kill our chances for peace. After leaving Israel, I was going to Syria. You can't go to Syria from Israel. I had to go to Cyprus, arrived in Damascus, took a taxi to the hotel. He said, where are you coming from? I said, Israel. I said, my God, Israel, the enemy. He was like the Israeli taxi driver in his early 30s. Kept driving, he said, what are we doing in Israel? I told him. After 20-30 minutes, when I arrived at the hotel, he said, please don't pay me. All we need is peace. I said, are you communicating with Shlomo, the taxi driver? That's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jarrett Lever. I'm studying linguistics and Portuguese here at BYU. I'm also studying Hebrew, and I mean Hebrew 101. My question for you, Professor Said, is in your opinion, what is the role of Israel in developing peace in the Middle East and the West?
When you say what's the role?
What is the role of Israel? The state of...
I mean, Israel, like any other state, has people working for peace, people defending the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
There are many Israelis that I work with who are very much involved in peacemaking efforts. There are other Israelis who represent a position of whatever government is at that time. So when you are asking me what is the role, if you can be more specific, I'd be happy.
I guess probably more specific as Israel is the only democratic nation in the Middle East.
In the Middle East at this time, we have Turkey that is democratic, and the Turkish administration that is democratic has come out from a Muslim party. Certainly. We have Morocco attempting to work with democracy. The proposition that Israel is the only democracy, which is constantly repeated, tell it to the Palestinians living in Israel. They will tell you, wait a little. We don't enjoy the same rights and privileges of Israelis who are Jews. So that becomes questionable.
Thank you.
If your question is Israel the only state in the Middle East that has free election, yes. Turkey has free elections. So it has to be basic context.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Hello, my name is Idris Sanjay. I strongly believe that what is really stopping peace is a lack of trust between people. So listening to you, I think maybe I may be wrong, but what you're saying is that interfaith discussion and religion is the solution to bring trust between people.
You are very correct in talk about trust. We in our business talk about the sense of the other, the emotion of the other. Building trust is extremely important, it's foundational. What I have been learning in my work in zones of conflict, whether it is Israel, South Africa, Middle East, other places, I've learned to address my friends that I work with when I'm with Turks and Armenians. I've learned to begin to say Turks and other Armenians. And I've started to learn to say Greeks and other Turks. And I've started to learn to say Jews and other Arabs. The immediate reaction, sometimes shocked, but I said, yes, you scratch a Jew and you find an Arab. You scratch a Turk and you find an Armenian. But I'm trying to say, they are caught in that tragedy, that agony of the other. We try to look at the similarities of Shlomo and Mustafa, Damascus and Tel Aviv. Yes, trust is very important. This notion of mirror images of projecting on others. A good deal has been done in that area. Yes.
So I guess what I'm really looking for is, will you say that religion will bring a response to this problem instead of governments? Like political leaders, all these guys who were saying, let's separate church from I don't know if from state. I don't know if
I hear what you are saying.
Okay.
I mean, the challenge for us in the United States now more than ever before is to understand and appreciate, going back to what Doug Johnson was speaking earlier, the role that religion plays in dealing with diplomats. Oftentimes hard to appreciate, to deal with religion as a factor. It's becoming more recognized, more acknowledged that while true religion historically has been used in abusive ways, religion has great foundation for trust building, peacemaking. That's what more and more, hence my plea to establish an interfaith institute of peace emanates from that belief, commitment that indeed religion as a force for peace is critical.
Thank you.
In discussion earlier with colleagues of mine who are on your faculty here, I shared the experience at some young diplomats meeting with me, asking me what books they should read to deal more effectively with Iranians, Arabs. Well, I said, begin by reading a book by Attar, Fariduddin Attar, entitled Conference of the Birds, and begin to understand the culture, the context. We in international relations, we have decontextualized politics. We have to place it in context. And when in my training, similar to most of you here, I was trained in the United States in higher education. And in my training in higher education, what I have been taught to accept in looking at big events, big conflicts, focus on the material, the technological, the economic, that which can be quantified. By doing that and overlooking emotions, feelings, and beliefs, we place it out of context. So what happens, we reduce substance to phenomena, to generalizations, fundamentalism, etc., etc. So that's part of the challenge. Yeah? So yes, to deal with Arabs, Muslims, we have to read Attar. We have to read Conference of the Birds. And we have to read similar works. Yes? Recently, I met a young American diplomat who's highly loved in the Arab country where he serves, and I discovered why. They said, well, he recites poetry when we talk with him, we deal with him, he understands our culture. That's what mattered a great deal. Yeah. I was expecting to say he knows history, diplomacy, international law. I'm sure he knows all of that too. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I was thinking about the first building block, which you said was not resolving conflict, but transforming that conflict. Could you clarify that a little bit more? And does that have something to do with the higher concept of jihad, the personal conflict against evil emotions, sins, personal weakness, etc.?
That's why when we look at peace programs, it is important to recognize the language. Some of us talk about departments of conflict management. Some of us use the term conflict resolution. Some of us use the term conflict transformation. What conflict management and conflict resolution do not do, they do not transform the conflict. They do not transform the power relationship between the conflicting parties. What they do, they resolve that conflict, but power relationship continues to be one very high, one very low. The disparity in power continues to be one high, one low. Connected with that is the other notion mentioned, transformation, inner transformation. That is, you mentioned jihad. What jihad has to do is what? Is spiritual inner struggle for refinement. Abused by others to use it against others. So transformation indeed results in altering the relationship of power.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much.